I was looking at one of my past Facebook posts when I ran into this photo of Sol 1303. At this time, Curiosity rover was at the edge of the Naukluft Plateau. In this place, I found signs of both Martian aquatic life and the remains of many artifacts and objects, clearly made by intelligent beings. I decided to examine a little closer just the ridges we see in this photo, and using a new software and technique, I've tried to further clear the photo and bring out more evidences. This is the raw image. And this is my enhancement. Many have asked me about the colors you see in these enhanced photos. These colors are not added, I've just used a color corrector tool in my software to remove the fake reddish color and to enhance the colors already present in the objects, revealing their original color range. Therefore, I learned that metal, for example, has the tendency to show more blues or green, while other things the colors vary. On these ridges, there are lots of debris. Most of them seems to be twisted or melted metal, and artifacts unfamiliar to us, but one thing is certain, these are not just rocks and someone made them. I divided this photo again in 3 parts, because the number of debris, artifacts and remains of structures and machines are many. The number of debris, it's impressive, and it feels like a lot was blown into pieces and scattered all over these ridges. As usual, at first, everything looked just like the previous photos I've researched, a lot of indistinguishable debris, but after the enhancements, I was able to pull out as many details as possible as you see. In the next photos, we will look at some of them closely. Under the fake colors, fake sand and fake rocks brushed over by NASA photo retouch artists, there are many large and small machine parts, melted metals. Also, we can recognize something that could be or could have been some sorts of flying crafts, structures or part of them that could be the remains of buildings. At a close look, we can also see objects that could have been vehicles. The destruction that we see here seems to confirm that the area of the Naukluft Plateau, at one point in the history of Mars, hosted a large city. The number of debris, ruins, artifacts, and objects that I found, not only on this ridge, it's impressive, and it looks like that whatever catastrophe hit this place melted and blown into pieces. Everything was here, scattering the debris all over the hills and the ground. Something extremely powerful happened here. The heat generated must have incinerated and melted everything instantly. Were the Mars inhabitants at war with a more advanced alien species? Or, perhaps, a cosmic disaster? It's possible that the story of the destruction of the planet Maldek, mentioned in the Sumerian texts, is the real cause of this devastation on Mars. According to the researchers and theorists of the Anunnaki mythologies, as they are narrated in the Sumerian tablets, it's a definite possibility. But, whatever the reasons were for such devastation, it must have been terrifying for the inhabitants and life of Mars. The attempt of NASA and the mainstream science to hide from all of us this undeniable truth is just too pathetic, but they cannot continue to hide it. The evidence are many, and they are right here in their own photos. As we look at these, let's call them rocks, we can definitely notice that they look clearly melted. Their shape doesn't seem to be something naturally formed. We have 2 options to understand what they might be. The first, perhaps they are of volcanic nature. The second, they are objects that were melted by a very high source of heat. I believe the second option is the most valid one. The shapes of these so-called rocks seem more remains of artifacts or objects, mostly metallic and with structures that seem designed by intelligent beings. What do you believe they might be? Just volcanic rocks or melted artifacts? We are now going to look at some objects a little closer. As you will see, They are clearly not rocks or tricks of light. The first, so-called anomaly, it's really intriguing. We have seen and found on Mars many objects that look like our own vehicles and crafts here on Earth. We have seen cars, boats, submarines, jets, and tanks. As usual, we can only compare what we see in these Mars photos with what we have and know here on Earth. What we see here, it seems to be some kind of vehicle, perhaps military, since it resembles an armored light tank of World War II, the famous M3A3 Stuart light tank. You can see the remarkable similarity in the next couple photos that I've put as a reference. The likeness is quite extraordinary. The size, the shape, and, unfortunately, even a person standing outside the turret. The figure we see, it seems to wear some kind of heavy suit. It resembles another figure, found some time ago by another researcher, wearing a similar suit. It seems obvious that this vehicle and its occupants have been sitting here for a very long time. Perhaps that fatal day, when Mars was destroyed, they died on the spot and frozen in time by something that petrified them. This next detail shows something really unusual and intriguing. I named it the cowboy hat. As you see, indeed, it looks like a cowboy hat. Definitely, it cannot be a rock, perhaps a satellite dish? Some unusual structure or part of it? What do you think this could be? As I mentioned earlier, this area shows strong pieces of evidence of metallic objects melted and twisted by something extremely hot and powerful. What you see here shows both signs of something that has been twisted and melted, creating almost a modern sculpture. We do not need to be rocket scientists to see and understand that this is not a rock formation or the product of wind erosion. This thing once was something else made by someone. Also, the close proximity to the tank makes it logical to speculate that perhaps it was part or another military object. Do you agree with me? This one seems to come straight out of a sci-fi movie. I am a sci-fi lover, maybe that is why what I see here is a spacecraft of some sort, a type of fighter. Look at this theoretical design made by an artist and let's compare it with this object in this photo. Astonishing, isn't? This object has all that it's needed to fly. Wings, tail, cockpit and a drone type of engine. It's just wind erosion? Pareidolia? Or just my own fantasy? What do you believe this object is? Write it in the comments below. We are now looking at the last two sections of this ridge. As on the previous sections, seemingly melted debris of something is resting everywhere on these slopes. As you see, the arrow is pointing to objects that do not look like typical rocks. They have angles and shapes not quite natural, but they do show signs of being blown into pieces and hit by some high heat source. The probable high heat impact that this area underwent can be also seen in this last portion of this photo. Here too another large object seemingly made of metal is standing on this slope, totally disfigured, twisted and melted as you see. Here it seems that a structure was once standing here. It is clearly visible a straight line and a corner leading at another portion of this possible structure. Is this what remains of a foundation or a wall? Could be that all these artifacts that we see highlighted were parts of one large construction that now is partially buried under the sand? Perhaps we cannot see the rest of what is here, because NASA covered it up with their usual Photoshop manipulation. Or they are just covered by the sands of time. Let us look again at this object, which seems to be just like the other one that is few yards on the ridge next to this. These two large objects are clearly not part of the rocks formation around them. They are sticking out like sore thumb. The obvious question is, what are they? It's quite difficult to figure out their origin. They seem made out of metal, twisted and melted. Your guess is good as mine. But it would be nice to find out what they are. What is your guess? The question that very often comes to my mind when I see or find these artifacts so Earth-like is, how is this possible? Anything we see in these Mars photos has been there for centuries or millennia. How is it possible they look like ours? Is it really just pareidolia? Or is there another logical explanation? Certainly, we cannot deny what we see, so how is this possible? I like to think that perhaps we are indeed the offspring of this Martian civilization, escaped from Mars and ended up on Earth. Maybe their knowledge of how to make things has been released with time and the progress of the human race, so that today we have little by little recreated what once we have lost on Mars. We are indeed Martians' descendants.